and down. So she kind of like included you from across a class.
Yeah. And she would all, but she did that. She just had this real sense of, and I think it was driven a lot through her relationship with her mum, to be honest, around making sure that it was an inclusive environment. Like even where her house was in Ruddington, when I say like the door was always open, literally, anyone could just rock up. You'd never know who would be there. Oh wow, this is cool.
Wow, it's pretty magic with all the blossom in there.
Yeah. Wow. That is such a spot. So I would have first met Amy. I joined the girls' high school in Nottingham, and I didn't know anyone else that was going there. And like I say, Amy was in a different class, so we weren't actually together. We were in some lessons together maybe, but just her aura was to involve everyone, include everyone. But Amy was really keen on just being friends with everyone.
Yeah.
And I was saying to Ruby before, the house in Ruddington, when they lived in Ruddington, it was such an overwhelming property and garden, but the doors were always open, and you'd go around to Amy's and you wouldn't know who was going to be there, but you knew that there would be a collection of people there, different ages. Like it was so, at that age, if I think when I was 13, 14, there's not many other families that I could have thought, oh yeah, I'll go and I'll be with Amy's mum, her aunts, family, friends, and you just felt so comfortable. And it was just one conversation rather than you rock up and there's children in this part and then adults over here. And everyone would cook together, everyone would sit together. And then the Collins family lived next door as well. And you'd literally physically jump over the fence. They had a swimming pool. Like it was just, the kind of stuff that you read or you watch in these like American films and you think, school's not really like that. It was. And it was full of animals, dogs, cats, loads of nods to horses. Obviously there weren't horses actually there. The reality is Amy and Sharon also went through a lot of shit. And they experienced their own grief, their own heartache, whether it was Amy losing a dad at a young age, other things that went on in the family. They had a family business, and the economy hasn't always been kind. And actually they always anchored themselves, one with each other as that unit, but also with their animals. Like you could see that was a real ground for them. And that's why this place, not only does it keep their legacy alive because of the service that we're going to deliver, but actually because I know for them, animals gave them that anchorage when they were going through some rough times, and hopefully this will act as that for so many other people.
Absolutely.
Going through their own experience. And I think it's so easy. You can look through the blog, you can look back at all these amazing photos of all these great times that we had. But like social media, it's not always exactly what it looks like. But that joy that you described and that kind of fire for wanting to make the most of every day was what Amy and Sharon were all about. And there's an amazing picture of when Amy was travelling where you'll have seen it, where she stood next to a wall that's been graffitied with Carpe Diem. And like if there was ever anything, you just need to add a horse into that, and that would be like a dog and a mum, and that's all that you would ever need to be able to represent her. So
it's interesting how this whole project really like mirrors those like key themes that you talk about there. And I really get the sense of, when you're talking about the Ruddington house and always, Amy's house, doors always open, that like sense of community and how this whole project, like it's no one person, if you looked at it in like really close up, you might be like, oh, Ruby does this, like Holly does, like different people do different things, but actually like the whole thing is so much bigger than any one person.
And also it is literally the analogy of, it doesn't matter what your profession is, where you came from, we've all, we didn't know each other before this. And our lives on paper are completely different, but actually in different ways we're both able to input and to add and
So Amy's like spent her whole life dedicated to horses. That's
Yeah.
her passion. And when we get to 2013, she's left uni by then, hasn't she?
So she's left uni. She has been travelling around South America, riding horses on the beach, visiting sloths in their natural habitat. That's another huge love for Amy. And she's now back in Nottingham, living with her mum, and has a job, looking and toying at the idea of maybe moving to the Middle East. So like it was right at the beginning where the shift over to Dubai. And even that, if you think about how horses and the relationship with Dubai and that presence, that was actually one of the reasons why Dubai was on her radar. Not just from a work perspective, but that she could also continue that relationship with horses while she was over there. So she was exploring that, albeit it was at early stages. And then, being completely honest, like it was just completely out of the blue, everything that happened. And I think that is what shook all of us, but in our own way. Like we all dealt with it very differently. Within a space of just a few days, Amy went from not feeling well, like almost feeling like a bit fluey, to going and seeing a GP. Her mum saying, come on, let me take you to the doctors, and getting to the doctors and then realising that whatever was going on was pretty sinister. So she went to the doctors one morning and never went back home. She was taken straight to hospital, and it all progressed and got super serious really quickly, to the point where they knew something was going on with her heart, infection, and they made the decision to put her into an induced coma because she was getting quite panicky about it and obviously quite anxious, whilst they still couldn't identify exactly what it was. And at that point, obviously, we were all in the loop, but all of us from wherever we were in the country just kind of made our way back to Nottingham to be together. And
this is all August 2013, isn't it?
So this all happened within the space maybe 4, 5, 6 days. I remember being in Manchester and Amy said, my sister was getting married, Amy and Sharon were coming to the wedding, and Amy was like, oh yeah, I've got this cold, I'm really hoping I'll have got over it in time for the wedding in a week's time. And like, you just had no clue what was coming at us. And obviously Amy didn't make it to the wedding, and nor did Sharon, because obviously just life changed literally overnight. Amy had myocarditis, which was an infection, I'm not a medic, but infection of the inner chambers of the heart. The hospital were amazing. So she had open heart surgery. They used an ECMO machine, which again, I'm not an expert, but it basically, when it's connected to you, it removes the reliance on all of your major organs like your heart and your lungs, and allows you every chance to fight whatever infection or illness you're dealing with. Now, in Amy's circumstance, unfortunately, it wasn't enough. But there was, I think all of us now, and even straight after, knew that there was nothing more that the medics could have done. And actually, one of the things that we did as a first kind of response in terms of fundraising and giving back was we actually raised enough money, and this was Sharon, so Amy's mum, almost turned her grief into ammunition to give back. So we raised shed loads of money, over 120 grand, and we actually bought an ECMO machine, which is now at the Queen's and City Hospital across the two. And I think from memory at that time in 2013, I think there was only 6 or 7 across the whole of the UK. So when people were unwell, people had to make decisions about who got the opportunity of having one of these machines. So just to kind of hit home what a big thing it was actually being able to buy that piece of kit. We also set up the Duffield training room at the hospital as well. And
Is
again,
this at the QMC?
Yeah. And again, kitted all of that out. And Sharon was in the paper, her and the consultant and the surgeon that treated Amy kind of opened it. And it was just, obviously it would never bring Amy back, but it was something that we could do to show a token of our appreciation for their efforts. So yeah, it was pretty heavy, but Sharon was determined at that stage to give thanks and give back and give other people like Amy the opportunity to fight and to stay here and living. Over time, you can imagine that grief journey, and we all went on it in different stages. Sharon was determined that we wanted to set up a trust, that we could continue fundraising, which we did. We've done localised things, like we've got a bench, a memorial bench at the high school where we all went to, with Amy's name on, with some hilarious like words that will just remind everyone of Amy and what she was all about. But then also, animals were such a big part of their life. And even through Sharon's grief, when Amy came back to Nottingham after uni, Amy had basically persuaded Sharon to get a dog. And they'd had dogs before, right? They'd had dogs, they'd had cats. But at this time in her life, I don't know whether Sharon on her own would have made that decision to get a dog. And they got a little cockapoo called Maisie, who was like just part of the family from day one.
Yeah.
They also had a cat called Malibu. Not because that's what me and Amy used to drink when we were younger. But Maisie was such a companion to both Amy and Sharon whilst they were living together, and obviously things were stable. But actually, after Amy had gone, Maisie, I'm not sure what Sharon would have done without Maisie, because when everyone, all the visitors left and Sharon was there at night, Maisie was there, and that meant that Amy was with her as well. Sharon sadly went on to fight her own battle, so had cancer, and we lost Sharon in May 2020, so in the midst of COVID. But even through all of her treatments, Maisie would have been there by her side, which brought some comfort. We promised Sharon that we would continue the legacy. Oh my God. And here we are. Here we are. But
So
I know horses
yeah.
definitely. Something to do with children,
over here.
people that hadn't necessarily had the opportunities that Amy had through being able to ride and own horses. Sharon recognised, and Amy did, that it was a privilege that they were able to do that. So it was really important that whatever we continued to fundraise for and the trust that we set up was about helping people that maybe in their day-to-day life didn't have access to such opportunity. So yeah, standing here today, seeing these beautiful horses,
shouting at each other in their own non-verbal way.
I feel like this is Amy and Sharon coming over in spirit to say, excuse me, Polly, you've not told the story correctly.
Where we need more horses.
Yeah, you've missed this bit out, and yeah, all we need now is Maisie to bound through.
I mean, it is an incredible story, isn't it? Like, just in terms of like, you know, like where you could go with that, where Sharon could have gone with that into the depths, and to have kept Amy's real like passion for horses, and also like the therapeutic element of that bond that it brought them through their life, well, particularly Amy through her life, to keep that alive. And then, you know, Sharon then went on to dedicate her
when you
estate
step
to
back
it.
and you think Sharon lost her husband and her only child, you would not, no one could criticise if Sharon just chose to close herself off. But actually, even in the depths of her grief, her priority was to look after us as Amy's friends. And actually, she wanted, for those of us that wanted to continue to fundraise and be involved, she wanted us to have that focus and that purpose so that we didn't spiral. And I think that, for me, is just like so amazing that Sharon and Amy have helped me so much deal with losing both of them. But also finding a way for me to be able to then continue my life. And I feel so blessed, and I was saying this to you earlier, Ruby, but I fell pregnant in February 2020, and I got to see Sharon and tell her that I was pregnant just before we went into lockdown. And then Sharon passed away of her own illness in the May, and I'm just so blessed that even then she was so calm, and I promised her that I would do whatever I could to keep Amy's legacy, Sharon's ambitions alive. And here we are in 2025 on 15 acres of land with horses and
with Bob,
exactly,
with Libby.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty incredible.